You want the property. You just don't know what it's going to cost to get from point A, which is where it is today with the illegal construction, and where you need it to be, which is where that's legalized and permitted. And we fill in that gap.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to SALESBIZ. I appreciate you all taking the time. Before we kick off our episode, folks, I need you all to do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and like this specific episode. And if you have any comments for us, please drop them down below. Today, my guest comes from a wide variety of sales experience, coming straight out of the Bay Area, and now is the owner of his own company, Groundswell Management. I'm super excited to have him share his insight and talk about his journey. Mr. Bob Biederman. Bob, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you taking the time, bud. Happy Friday.
Likewise.
So let's kick it off, Bob. Before we dive into your company, dive into your COO experience and all that good stuff, let's talk about how you started off your journey as a professional here in the Bay Area.
So my journey actually starts in the New York metropolitan area. I grew up in a small family. My father worked for a utility company, and we flipped 3 houses by the time I was 16. And so I got my hands dirty. I learned how to build. And when I was in high school, I had a classmate whose father owned a construction company. And I said, hey, I'd really like a job. And while on the crew one day as a senior in high school, my boss was heading out to do an estimate for a client. And I said, why don't you let me do it? And wouldn't you know, I sold the job. And he couldn't believe it. And so he started sending me out more and more often. And by the time I was a sophomore in college, I was his lead project manager. And when I was a junior in college, I had my own little construction company to help make extra money on the side. Graduated with a bachelor's in business management and economics. Worked for a couple of years for him in New York, kind of general manager of his business, and then decided what I wanted out of my life was to live at the coast and be a surfer and do my own thing. And so I packed up everything I owned at 27 and I drove west. I wound up, did a socio-demographic comparison of every city in Northern California to find the most cost-effective place to live, and landed in Chico, of all places. Lovely little town. And I was hired on as the director of project management for a factory home company. And that was a really great opportunity and experience to see a side of the business I'd never seen before. Unfortunately, that was 2009, and they didn't last much longer than the end of the year. But my work carried me forward, and one of their clients from Sonoma called me up and said, hey, we've got this set of plans and nobody to build the house. Would you come to Sonoma and open a construction company? So I came to Sonoma, got my contractor's license in 3 months, and I started RJ Biederman Construction, building and designing custom homes for about 10 years. And kind of got to a point where my body was getting a little tired and my brains were kind of the more valuable asset, and decided to switch gears and got into the regulatory industry, working for the county of Sonoma, checking building plans. That was in 2016. And in 2017, we were hit by the horrible wildfire. And I was lucky enough to be able to manage the county's response to that for the building department. They call it the Rapid Evaluation Safety Assessment. And doing that led to a position managing the Resiliency Permit Center, giving the permits out to all the fire victims. And from there, I was headhunted out by a civil engineering firm as their chief operations officer. That brings us basically to the pandemic, where their expansion plans kind of fizzled out and my position with it. But along the way, I had learned a lot of lessons about the business, about homeowners, about the different sides of the industry and how discombobulated it really is, how a real estate agent might never meet a contractor, and a homeowner, they're, when they go to buy a house, it goes to title. They don't even know what that is. When you talk terms of legal construction, depending on whether you're in the real estate industry or the construction industry, those mean 2 different things. So we developed Groundswell Management as a way to create one housing industry out of many industries. It's kind of become so complicated to build a home that we've got these micro industries now with the real estate professionals that really know the transaction and how to do the paperwork for the transaction and make sure the liabilities are handled, but they don't know about permitting. And the permitting professionals, they know all 10,000 pages of the building code and the zoning code and the fire code, but they don't know how to actually build the things or how to price out construction. And we realized that we had a unique skill set and we're able to kind of bridge the gap between the three and offer services to do just that.
Wow. Great story, man. So going all the way back to working with your dad, when you've made that first sale, was that you learning from what he did, or is that something that you picked up through some books, through some watching some videos? How did you land that first account?
Bob Vila, to be honest. So it was learning, taking what I had already learned, expressing it confidently, and stretching it just enough that I knew I could back it up. And Bob Vila, I just watched a show on how to finish a deck, and he was talking about old wood decks. They would use tung oil. And I was 17 years old, and I was selling to a guy that was in his mid 50s. And I said, back in the old days, we used to use the rub-on tung oil finish, but they don't do that anymore. I've never even seen tung oil.
I was just about to ask, but I don't know if I want to go deeper on that. Fair enough. So California, New York to or East Coast to California, outside of the surf game, what did you see in terms of a transition in culture within your specific industry?
Well, in our industries, it's almost the physical construction part is completely different. In the East Coast, all of the weight on a building comes from the top. It's gravity. You have snow weighing down in the building, ice penetrating through the different cracks in the building. So you do a lot to resist gravity loads. In California, you don't really have gravity loads. It's not going to snow as much unless you're up in the Sierras, but we have lateral loads from earthquakes. The house is going to fall down sideways, not up and down. So you have a lot more structural additions on the home to keep it from swaying back and forth that you wouldn't have on anything other than a coastal property out east that would be subject to hurricanes. Yeah. So it's a completely different methodology there. But in terms of sales, it's a totally different world as well. If you come in as a New York salesman and you go to a California homeowner, you're going to bowl them over. It takes a much finer touch, a much lighter touch, but still the same energy and attitude that you would. So it took a little bit of adjusting to really be effective out here in California.
Yeah, the East Coast minute is real, that's for sure. For some reason, I always get, Mike, are you sure you're not from New York or something along those lines? I saw Goodfellas one too many times about him. I spent maybe a couple of days in New York max. Maybe it's my Russian, Eastern European side that's coming out. But no, I totally understand you. There's two different personalities. Not everyone can tolerate it, both on each side right off the bat. So with respect to starting your own business now, Bob, clearly you were impacted by the pandemic right now with your COO position. What inspired you specifically to become a company owner during one of the worst pandemics in this century?
Well, I'm also a history buff. And if you look at some of the most successful people in American history, they didn't come to their success when times were good. When times are good, everyone kind of rolls along and everyone's happy and nothing really happens. But when times are bad, you get your JP Morgans, your Rothschild, your Roosevelts, your Rockefellers. They see the diamond in the rough. They see the opportunity where everyone else sees despair, and they have the intestinal fortitude to go all in and throw it all on the table and say, no, I want to change the world and I want to do it now. And that's where success comes from. And that's what we saw is we have a unique shift in people's assets has happened over the past 40 years where we used to save in our retirement account and that was where our value was. But our homes have skyrocketed in value to the point where our homes are more valuable than our retirements. But we still have a financial advisor looking at our retirement account and a guy with a pickup truck and a tool belt telling us how to take care of our home. We're not doing this right. And so I see that as a huge risk to the individual homeowner. Real estate professionals, real estate investors, they know what they're doing. They know how not to get into trouble. But I watched my parents make a decent living, but retire off of what they did with their homes. And I want that for everyone. That's the American dream, right? That the home doubles in value every 10 years and it creates security for the family. And I feel like that's being lost with how complicated the industry's become.
Absolutely. No, I mean, real estate investment, that's, whoever's up there is not making any more of this land. And definitely, I mean, whatever's on top of it, of course, obviously requires a lot of work, but at the same time, it's always been lucrative. And a lot of people made their wealth through just real estate alone. So I completely resonate with you. I'm actually very passionate about that topic as well. So with respect to the real estate investment side, can you talk a little bit about what your target market is? Like, who is the person or people or companies that you would prefer working with?
So our target market is individual homeowners, home buyers, and property developers. People who do this for profession, they do it for profession, but we have a lot of homeowners who, when you go out and buy a home, generally it's not exactly what you want. You might want an addition or a swimming pool, or you might find out it has illegal construction on the property and that needs to be legalized, and you don't know how to do that. So we're designed to be streamlined, to be small, and keep the economies of scale at a price point where we can market to the individual homeowners. So we have multiple services we offer, and the first one is the missing disclosure from the home purchase process. You have disclosures for pests, you have them for home inspection, you have them for there's a COVID disclosure now, but what there's not is a permitting disclosure. Nowhere can you get a disclosure to say what on your property was built legally and what was built illegally, other than a signed affidavit from the seller. Well, very oftentimes the seller doesn't know any more than you about this stuff. And the codes were written, at least in Sonoma County, they were adopted in 1964. They didn't write anything down until 1985, and it didn't go into the computers until 1995. So you're expected to have everything from 1964 built legally and with permits, but nobody knows what happened between 1964 and 1995 until they go to remodel or do an addition. And then they go into the county and the county says, guess what? Half of your house doesn't exist. Well, you can't go back to the seller at that point and say, hey, give me half my money back, because you signed that away as part of the purchase. So we've created a process where we can quickly and easily offer a disclosure to tell you, okay, you're buying a house with an outbuilding. It has a second unit and a swimming pool. You actually are buying legally an 850 square foot cabin, because that's what's on record at the county. Or more often than not, it's an addition or a second unit that needs to be legalized. And we sometimes get the label deal killers by real estate agents that don't understand the value of the service. But what we are is we're fog clearers. You want the property. You just don't know what it's going to cost to get from point A, which is where it is today with the illegal construction, and where you need it to be, which is where that's legalized and permitted. And we fill in that gap, that missing information of what's this going to cost. And then we provide that to the real estate agent, and they do what they do best, and they make a deal out of it. You can't make deals out of question marks. They make everybody uneasy and they make them walk away. But if you can quantify it, you can sell it.
Absolutely. With respect to that process, I mean, can't they do like an appraisal and check out everything that the county has as part of the actual contingency? Or are you talking about just fast flips that don't even have that time or effort available?
So the appraisal process does not go into building permit record history typically. There are some banks now that are looking more deeply at that, but it's still very, very new. The appraisal is just looking at what the value of what's been constructed is. What's it worth in cash dollars so the bank can write a loan? If you look at an NDS document for a real estate sale, it has a bunch of disclaimers in there saying we hope you hire a qualified home inspector to inspect for any structural damages. We expect you to hire a qualified geotechnical engineer to look for any landslide potential. And then under permitting, it says a qualified professional. Who is that? They don't exist. So it was written with this blank like description of some professional out there somewhere that doesn't exist in the world. Well, Groundswell Management says, yes, we do. We exist. And the hardest part of being able to offer that service was being able to insure it. When we went to the insurance brokers and we said what we wanted to do, they had no idea how to insure us, whether we were in the construction industry, we were in the real estate industry. We actually had to submit sample work products, resumes, this description of the services we're going to offer. And they used that to create a new type of errors and omissions type general liability policy for us to take construction architectural services and use them in the real estate industry.
And does this actually prolong the sales process, or does it?
It doesn't. Thankfully, the Freedom of Information Act and the use of API technology by jurisdictions has made that information available at your fingertips through their electronic portal systems, or required to be provided within 10 business days by law, because it's public information. They're on a clock. Once I send an email to the county and say, I want all the building records for this parcel, they have a certain time period within which they have to respond and give me all of that. So that's done wonders for making that information more accessible. No longer do I have to make an appointment at the county and go down there and roll through rolls of microfiche to find what I'm looking for.
Tell me about it. So I think I just told you, my wife and I recently moved to the Oakland Hills, and we moved into a home that was completely gutted except for one wall, basically. And the backyard didn't have a fence. That was the only downside to it. So I went to the county, had to pull up records because I didn't want to pay like a 10K for doing a survey. I'm pretty frugal in this regard. So, but that was a pain in the tail process, going to the county, standing in line, and this was pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So where I'm going with that is, how has COVID impacted this business, and are they truly honoring this whole 10-day process, or is there some leeway around it now?
It's actually, it's forced them to improve. The employees of the counties, they're unionized, and the union is not going to allow them in the building if the building is a risk to the employees. So the counties and cities themselves had to revolutionize very, very quickly. They had to implement mobile technologies and remote workspaces and allow people to submit from remote locations almost overnight. And by and large, they've done a great job. It's very, very impressive. Generally they evolve at a snail's pace. The people work hard, but the processes don't change very quickly. COVID's caused them to very, very rapidly change the way that they do business. And it's done great things for our business.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we know that COVID has improved the counties and government's performance. What about your current industry? I mean, I know it's a very hot housing market still here in California, specifically Northern California, but tell me a little bit more. Maybe I'm speculating in the wrong direction.
Well, the construction industry has been very lucky to have been considered an essential service due to the existing housing crisis. So by and large, you get to keep rolling on with your construction projects with very little interruption. Our business was built with the idea that technology is at a place where we don't need brick and mortar. We were built to be mobile. Everything we do, we've got cloud access network attached storage devices and mobile workspaces. So everywhere we go, we're online. We have access to all our files. We can work from anywhere we want. And that's by design. And probably COVID had something to do with that. But it also keeps us lean and mean. It keeps the money where it belongs, which is on the improvements of your property rather than ours.
No question. And what about in terms of competition? Do you see a lot of competition in the space doing these things? I mean, you mentioned the counties are evolving into these technologies. What's stopping people from doing this, bypassing you, I guess would say, and doing this directly themselves?
They don't know how. That's basically all it is.
Subject matter expertise.
Yep.
That's all you had to say.
So, working for the county government gave me a tremendous amount of insight to how they do things. And it's a totally different methodology than you would expect, how they file things, how the process goes behind the scenes, what happens behind closed doors. And knowing that and having that knowledge allows me to work as a partner to them and say, okay, I know it has to go through X, Y, and Z on its way. Is there anything I can do to help you get there? Whereas the next guy is just going to be calling and say, where's my plans? Where's my plans? Where's my plans? I know where your plans are because I've put them there before. The other side of it is any real estate agent can do the same thing that I do, which is pull the Freedom of Information Act request for a property. But when you come down to looking at assessor's field notes from 1974 or looking at permit histories and understanding what a PX-09247 is, as opposed to a BLD 20-1925, they don't know. And they don't know which one supersedes the other one. They need us to lean on. They also need our insurance company to lean on, because if their insurance company knew they were doing what they're doing, they wouldn't be very happy about it.
No question. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, you're not buying a cup of coffee here. You're buying your own residence. Here it's usually in the 900 to 1,000 plus range. So it's a pretty big purchase. So extra due diligence is key, and specifically letting the professionals do what they do best and really helping you make that educated decision. What about in terms of just the overall housing market? I know that's not really your realm per se, but like to talk a little bit about, where do you envision everything going with COVID and everything that's happening right now? We're pretty much printing trillions of dollars. Where do you land in terms of the real estate market in 2021?
I think it's going to be an interesting future for the real estate market, because we've all just been a guinea pigs to this big test of remote working, and it works. We didn't all go home, put our feet up and slack off. We're still producing, we're still working. Things are still getting done, in some cases better than they were before. So being close to work isn't going to be necessary for everyone anymore. So where we live is not dictated by where we work any longer for everyone. So I think you'll see like coastal towns start to come up in price, because now we can put more houses out there and people will come buy them. You'll have areas around metropolitan centers that maybe were priced out of anyone's reach previously that might start coming down a little bit, because there's not as much demand to be that close to the city center. If I'm only going to San Francisco once a month instead of 3 to 5 days a week, totally different equation. So I think that we have a major housing shortage. There's no question about that. Personally, I believe that's an infrastructure issue. We don't have sewer and water service. So I can't build a reasonably priced house for the middle class without sewer and water service, because I'm into a piece of property for $500,000 before I start building the house. And that's a problem. So we will have a housing shortage, at least in the state of California, until we can resolve waste disposal and water supply. And I don't see that happening in the near term future. But where that supply goes is what's up for question. We're producing supply, not meeting demand. So the values are going to stay up, simple laws of supply and demand. But where we put the supply is going to be an interesting thing to watch. I think it'll kind of throw the industry standards out the window, and you'll see pop-up communities and developments in places you never would have expected to, because nobody can get to work from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, from an investment standpoint, obviously California is a touchy place, not just from a real estate, but from a tax standpoint. There's a lot of caveats in investing in California right now. What do you feel like is going to be the play in terms of, do you feel like the exodus will continue, or do you feel like people are going to start trickling into California knowing that there's a cheaper house that they could buy in, 40 minutes outside of Sonoma or a couple hours outside of San Francisco?
It's hard to answer that question for California as a whole, because we're such a diverse state. I think your Sonoma, San Francisco Bay Area, coastal properties, they're going to stay high, because you have nationwide, if not global, demand to look out of your front door and see a vineyard. Central Valley, maybe Los Sierras. I don't know if I can say the same thing about that. Not a lot of people I know want to look out and see flat, dusty crops. And we live there because we have to, because that's where the work is, because that's what we do. But maybe we'll see more reasonable prices in the Central Valley, Sacramento area, because that demand might diminish down. You also might start to see demand in places like Montana and Idaho, because man, if I could live in the mountains, I just might. So it's interesting. It's definitely a fun time to be involved. That's for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So let's pivot into from a company owner and leadership standpoint. Bob, what advice would you have for someone that wants to start a company in a pandemic right now?
Go for it.
Love it.
It's you're always competing against your comparative other when you look at, how far you're going to get and whether or not you're going to succeed. And when the entire country's just lost their life savings and spent 9 months at home out of work, what do you got to lose? You know, you're on a level playing field no matter what happens. So why not take a chance?
Absolutely. And are there any specific types of training you've had, or obviously you had some COO experience, you worked under your father, who sounded like an entrepreneur as well, a business owner, but what advice would you have for someone that doesn't have that type of background and but still wants to start their own company?
So depending on the company and what they're going to go into, the first place I would look is for technical support manuals and professional trade groups. I'm a licensed general contractor. I'm a certified building plans examiner, and I'm a certified construction manager. All three of those come with huge support networks like the North Coast Builders Exchange, the International Code Council, the Construction Management Association of America. When I wanted to start doing my own tile work, there's actually an ANSI standard for how to lay tile. I didn't need to hire a subcontractor. If I can read the standards and specifications of how the work's supposed to go, I know I can do that. I know what materials I need. I know what standards they have to meet. Everything in every industry that's already matured is standardized. There's a process. Some even are ISO 9000 type processes where it's all dialed in for you. If you're really burgeoning a new industry, a new type of service, well, still look for comparative others. Our disclosure product is unique, but you can bet I took a home inspection and modeled it off of that, because it's something people are used to seeing. They're comfortable with it. They know how that process works. They know when they call a home inspector, he's going to come out and look at the property. He's going to give them a report with a cover page and an abstract and a specified format with a date and a preparer. And so you give them something they're comfortable with, but it's your unique product type. So I would say, whatever it is you're inventing, whatever it is you've proposed or you're going to do, there's a comparative other, and it might be something totally off the chart, different from you, but it's still valuable to look at how did they do it and how does that apply to what I'm doing?
Absolutely. What about from a sales standpoint? You seem like a guy that carries himself very well in terms of sales and, not afraid to ask the tough questions, but not everyone comes with that type of personality. What advice would you have for someone to sharpen their sales skills, if anything?
Well, sales is a lot of it's confidence. You got to be confident in yourself and you have to be confident in what you're selling. But a lot of it too is being able to follow through with what you're selling. Anybody can speak confidently and be able to give a sales pitch, but then to be able to back it up with a product that matches the pitch. That's what sells the next job and the next job and the next job. I believe that, in sales, it's more a matter of just being honest and putting it all out there. I don't like to make promises I can't deliver on. And I'm not afraid to say, I got to get back to you on that. Because there's so much information that you need to have. And it's so important to the person that you're working with to get it accurate and get it right, that if you don't know it, don't say it. And if you do know it, but they're not going to like to hear it, say it anyway.
I guess that goes back to that confidence. But do you have a specific process that you follow? Like, I'll speak to one real. Is it speaking to realtors mainly, trying to get just the actual buyers or the sellers themselves? Like, what is your specific sales process?
So our sales process is kind of broken into two. One, our first service that we offer is that disclosure product that we generally sell to real estate agents that call us. They have a client that's interested in a property. There's some sketchy buildings and they want us to come in and get involved. And when that's the case, the first thing I do is I pull up the property records and I take a look at it as part of my own overhead expense. And then I talk to them about what they can expect. So, okay, this one looks pretty clean. There's not a lot to it. There is an outbuilding that's illegal. So that's going to be coming out in in the information, or this property is a mess. Be ready to do some damage control when my document comes out, because there's a lot going on here and there's a lot that needs to be done. Then when we're selling construction management services and design services for construction, we're working more with homeowners. And with them, my sales process is a little bit less technical, a little more emotion driven, because homeowners are very emotional about their properties and what's going to happen with them. And it's a lot more hands-on. I've found that you can put a set of plans in front of a real estate or a construction professional. It doesn't matter how small the plans are, they understand what they're looking at. A homeowner is not in the industry. The bigger you can make that set of plans, the easier it is for them to understand it. So I'll oftentimes bring a projector screen and a big dry erase board with me, and I'll blow their house up on the wall. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. There's the bathroom. I see the little toilet, and there's the hallway. And then we take a dry erase marker and draw over it so they can actually have some tangible input in the experience rather than just listening to me talk. Because if I talk like this to a homeowner, by the end of it, they think they were going to get suckered into buying a used car. They're just not, they don't want to have any of it. They want to know that you're vested in their property, you're vested in them. And especially with them, take your time, check in with them, say, are you okay? Are you understanding all this? Should we take a break? Is there anything you want me to go back to? Because it's a lot of information. And when you're in an industry that's complicated, it becomes so workaday for you that you forget to remember to realize that they're not in this industry. So you could just spout out information at them a mile a minute and just blow their minds out, and they're not going to remember any of it anyway.
I love that. I mean, it sounds like you're actually trying to better understand their specific scenario and reiterating that to them, not just speaking about it, but actually showing exactly what you folks are talking about, because everyone kind of learns in different ways. So I love that. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of bringing your own live demo into the process to really make them understand what they're trying to, not only what their pain points are, but what they're trying to accomplish. So completely resonate with that. Last question for you, Bob. Where do you want to see this business in the next 5 years? What are you really trying to accomplish? Or do you want to broach off into different counties, different states, possibly, maybe even internationally? What's your ideal here?
I'm a pretty humble guy. We're a family-owned business. We have no real major global aspirations. I want to make a good living and provide for my family. What I really want from the business model is competition. I want to see the real estate industry, the regulatory industry, and the construction industry come back together and be a housing industry. One of my mantras is the greenest thing we can do is to preserve what we've already built. And I keep seeing perfectly good houses underappreciated, dilapidated, run down because they weren't maintained properly. And then they get raised, demoed out, and replaced with a green building. And to me, that's so counterintuitive. If we just take care of what we've done and we develop responsibly and we reconstruct this industry as one industry, I think that's the most green and cost-effective thing we can do. And we can put the equity back in the industry where it belongs. Right now, we have massive equity bailing out of the industry with sellers because of all this illegal construction and rework that needs to be done for houses that haven't been maintained properly or weren't constructed properly in the heydays of the 70s. And that, to me, is just kind of like looking down the barrel of a loaded gun in terms of the housing industry. Just watching the equity run out of the industry is only going to make matters worse.
I think you're the first guest on my podcast that said, I want more competition. That's admirable and confident. So kudos to you there, bud.
Oh, it makes us all better.
Well, Bob, I really appreciate you taking the time. I mean, clearly you're on the right trajectory. You're definitely in the right industry, and you absolutely have the right mindset. So continue crushing it out there, and please stay in touch, my friend.
Appreciate that. Good to talk to you.
Likewise.